Good morning, everybody. The webinar will begin very shortly. We're just going to take a few moments while everybody joins the call. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, which is all about making AI transformation happen in government. I'm Siobhan Bonita. I'm a former UK civil servant, and I'm delighted to be chairing this webinar on behalf of Global Government Forum that serves civil servants here in the UK and all around the world. And I'd like to thank our knowledge partner today, which is Salesforce. So, in terms of the topic of today, making AI transformation happen in government, so AI has been named, as I'm sure many of you in the audience know, it's been named as the one big thing by the UK government this year. And every department, I think it's true to say, is now committed to using AI to help meet their efficiency targets, which in the spending review this year, the need was outlined to make £14 billion in annual efficiency gains by 28-29. So we're going to be looking at how AI will play that crucial role in helping departments to deliver better outcomes with fewer resources, freeing up capacity, reducing costs, ultimately producing better services. We're going to cover everything from the kind of technology issues, but also to the people and the cultural issues around AI implementation. We have five fantastic speakers with us here today. And in a moment, I'm going to do quick introductions to our speakers. And then we're going to get a conversation going. I'm going to ask each of them one or two questions and we'll get the conversation going. But we really do want to make this feel as interactive as possible with you, our audience. So we'd like to take as many questions and comments from you right from the start of today's webinar. So you should see on whichever device you are using at the bottom of your screen or somewhere on your screen, there will be a Q&A button. Please use that Q&A button at any point from now on to message in any comments or any questions you have while you're listening to our speakers. Please don't wait till the end of the webinar. We're going to try and come to those questions throughout our conversation today. So in terms of our great expert panel, we've got David Lewis, who is Deputy Director for the AI Programme Division and Strategic Innovation at the Government Legal Department. David's been a government lawyer for 24 years and has worked across many departments, including the MOD, HMRC, Department for Transport, where he's led legal teams working on some really important projects like EU exit legislation, Northern Ireland Protocol, and HS2. And since November 24, he's been leading the Government Legal Department's AI programme. The purpose there, and I'm sure we'll hear a bit more about that in a moment, is to find and implement ways to use AI to deliver better legal services to the government. Then we will hear from Francois Zimmermann, who is Field CTO for Europe, Middle East and Africa for Salesforce. Francois helps organizations to navigate the intersection of AI data and digital transformation. He's got extensive experience in data strategy, analytics, and AI-driven innovation, and he advises teams on leveraging this cutting-edge technology to drive business growth. He's previously held CTO positions at Tableau and Hitachi and has a background in analytics, cloud services and data integration, as well as vertical solutions for health and life sciences, financial services and manufacturing. Then I'm delighted to say we've got Ed Steele, who is the IT Fellow for Data Science at the Met Office, where he champions the development and delivery of the organisation's AI and machine learning capability. He has many years experience leading high impact contributions across academia, industry and government, and he works with internal and external partners to help them capitalise on new and emerging scientific and technical improvements unlocking opportunities for radically enhanced weather and climate related decision making. Great to have you with us from the Met Office. We don't often get the Met Office on our webinar, so really good to have you with us, Ed. Then we've got Emily Hill, who is Agentforce and Agentic AI lead for public sector EMEA at Salesforce. Emily has vast experience in regulatory industries with background in insurance and law prior to joining Salesforce, where she now has 7 years of experience in specialising in digital transformation for the public sector, working particularly in defence, justice and policing, and focusing on guiding those public sector organisations across EMEA and harnessing agentic AI to transform digital labour. So her work gives that perspective on the future of work and the use of AI technology in government, which we're going to hear a bit more about. And then last but by no means least, we've got Sheroz Junejo, who is Executive Director and Chief Data Officer for the UK Government Investments, which sits in HM Treasury. It's the Centre of Expertise for Corporate Finance and Government. And Sheroz leads digital data and technology transformation there and advises on some of the UK government's most complex fiscal and financial risks. His career spans infrastructure, capital investment, and portfolio management, and he's built multidisciplinary teams and shaped fiscal risk management and capital planning across Whitehall by embedding data and analytics into decision making and introducing digital and AI enabled approaches into core operations. So I'm sure you will all agree with me. We do have a fantastic, very nicely diverse team with us here today. Lots of different perspectives there. Please do take this opportunity, as I say, to make the most of this panel and message in your questions and your comments, and we'll get through as many of those as we can by the end of our conversation. But to kick off, I'm going to come over to you, David, and I'm going to ask you as kind of the opening question. So you've led the Government Legal Department's AI programme, as I said, since November 24. Can you just tell us a little bit about how AI is being used already in the Government Legal Service and what benefits that's having, and what kind of concerns or challenges do you see in that kind of AI implementation across the profession?
Sure. So far we have done quite a lot of foundational work. So we've surveyed what's going on in the world of big tech in the legal profession, large in the civil service. So we try to understand the environment that we operate in now, which is not at all familiar for those of us whose background is a sort of mainly legal background. We have prepared guidance for our staff so that they're able to use the tools that they get in a confident way and in a safe way. In terms of actual AI use, so far we have trialed various products, mainly over the last 12 months, and we trialed M365 Copilot, which is the one thing that is actually in the hands of quite a few of our people. We've recently scaled up the number of users there. In terms of the benefits, I think, being frank about that, we are seeing benefits when it comes to sort of smaller tasks, the kind of things that Copilot is good for day to day, things like summarization, using it for meetings to draw out different points and actions, priorities. And we're seeing people getting better at using it. The feedback we've been getting is that people think they're saving time. What we need to do next, and what we're planning to do as of this autumn, is to look at some of our bigger use cases, and that I think is where we should be getting benefits at scale from Gen AI. One of the and sort of, I suppose this then comes into some of the concerns that one has. With something like Copilot, that's quite straightforward. If you use Microsoft, Copilot plugs in, so to speak, very neatly. It's familiar, the format is easy. If you're looking at something new and you're looking at something that you're going to use at scale, perhaps for tasks that carry more complexity, more risk, then that's going to take time to get right. And judging by what we've seen so far, you need to make sure not only that you have something that has the right capabilities, you need to make sure that you're in the right place with your data security, your protection against cyber attack, all of these things that actually, for someone like me with my legal background, have not really been part of the world that I've operated in so much.
Yeah.
So I think a concern I have is that there's a great temptation with AI to get a bit of a sugar rush and to want to move forward quickly. And there's the FOMO involved, but actually to do it properly, I think it needs to be more systematic. And so for those of us who work on AI projects, part of the job actually is to manage expectations and to make sure that we do it in that systematic way.
Yeah.
So that's just a little bit about what we're doing, and some of the concerns. Other concerns really are the generic ones. So what do we have to say about the environmental impact? What do we have to say about the effect it will have on the way people work, the way people learn? So big questions that are just out there really for everyone to consider.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. That's a really good place to start. I think you've set the scene nicely because I think it's really interesting to hear from, as you say, a profession where your background isn't the kind of technology side of things. So what does that mean when you're asking people to start using some of these tools? So maybe we'll come back onto that in the conversations as well. And also, I think a lot of people, it will resonate with them that they're using AI for some of those smaller tasks, as you say, some of the routine tasks, and finding that is helping them to save time. But when it comes to the bigger transformations, maybe more thought needing to be given on, are the foundations right to actually get this done in
Absolutely.
a safe way as well. So again, lots of issues I think you're raising there that we can come back onto in the conversation. And then people in the audience as well might pick up on things that you've said around, and I'm sure Emily will be touching on this. What does it mean for the future of work and the future of learning and the skills that you're going to need? And also the environmental impact. We don't always cover that when we're talking about AI, but interesting that you've raised that right at the start. Thanks, David. Really good way to kick us off there. Francois, I'm going to come over to you now and say, I'm going to ask you for a slightly different perspective, I think, because from your kind of biography, you work across the private sector as much as the public sector. So I guess, what are your reflections from your experiences of working across sectors on how things are going with AI transformation? Are there kind of lessons that can be learnt in the public sector from what's happening elsewhere?
Yeah, so I think in my experience, AI for internal use case, there's not that much lag between public and private sector. So these internal co-pilot type use cases where people are using AI for things like summarization and drafts and search, the kind of human in the loop things, that's where there's a lot of commonality. I think where there's the difference is when you start to use AI on an external channel. So you're facing off to a customer or a citizen or a regulated firm or an external company that you are working with. That's where I think the need for more structure comes in, because then you need to start thinking about AI as digital labor and how you need to start thinking about how you're going to implement the controls. So mostly what happens in the regulated industries is that the two big questions you need to answer before you can use AI externally is number one, accuracy. I can't give the wrong answer. So suddenly retrieving the right data and making sure that the data is grounded in that specific interaction is really important. And then trust. I can't afford to leak data or take an action that is outside of the scope. So that's kind of, so I think that's where I've seen the difference. An example is when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about healthcare, public sector versus public sector versus private sector, life sciences and what have you. We did some work. The group in the States called Prasina. They do devices to manage diabetes, and the way they're thinking about agents for external facing patient engagement is very different to the way we've thought about it for public sector. So they're saying, if I can give people proactive nudges to keep them on the care pathway, if I can use their data to provide support for everyday needs, to provide, adult learning on how to use the devices, to keep them engaged with their care pathway, then I can deliver an experience which wouldn't be possible without digital labor, because I just don't have enough people to do that. So that is different. So what I think is the leading firms are the ones that are saying, what are the new agent-only experiences that I could get to, and that's kind of their true north. And then I think there's been a lot of stuff in the middle where you have these external facing channels, which are support channels, where there's a lot of AI being used there. And I think the reason that obviously support has been such a like a quick win is because a lot of companies are used to running these out-tasking relationships with external call centers. So they know how to, establish rules for for how I route work between my internal specialists and my offshore call centers. So they understand those concepts of when I create these AI agents on external channels, I'm not designing for AGI. I am designing for co-tasking. So I'm saying, how do my people pass work to digital labor, and how does that work get passed back, and what work do I pass off? So there are always going to be tasks which are human in the loop, and there's going to be a subset of tasks which digital labor is able to take. And so the people that are taking that co-tasking mentality are the ones that are getting to market really, really fast. So they're saying, when I define an external facing agent, I need to have a really clear definition of exactly what the role is, and anything which is outside of the role, the agent should reject. For each role, I need to know what data you can retrieve. I need to know what actions you can execute. And also what the guidelines are for work that you should escalate back to a human. And once you've kind of designed, those things, once you start with that design thinking, then you can start to have a list of jobs to be done for these digital agents on external channels. So that's I think the difference in maturity is this idea of co-pilots internally. You don't have those problems because there's always a human in the loop. As soon as you move to external channels, you start to have this design thinking around jobs to be done and digital labor, which just doesn't exist for internal.
Thanks, Francois. I mean, that's really interesting to hear the way, I mean, you matched what David said there about the internal processes. So I think there's probably, I think there's probably agreement on that across kind of the sectors where that's being used, and it's being used well and quite widespread. Interesting how you're saying now the difference between that external customer-facing use of AI. And I wonder whether some of those issues that you raised there around the human in the loop. I've done lots of these events over the last few years in the public sector where the message was there will always be a human in the loop. You don't have to worry too much. There'll always be a human in the loop. And now what you're saying is there is ultimately the human in the loop, but actually there is now this bit where you need to recognize where you can pass it over, as you could say, to the digital labor. And I wonder if the public sector is a bit cautious on that, because maybe some of the consequences, if that goes wrong for the public sector, are quite scary for some of them. So we can.
Well, yeah, and this is where I think there's this need to really think about managing digital labor as like a new class of employees. So you're going to say there are some things that I'm happy with digital labor managing, things like appointment booking, answering certain questions on knowledge, those sorts of things. And there are some things which I want the digital labor to gather all the information and make sure that the citizen has supplied everything I need before I escalate to human. Even that can be transformative.
Yeah.
Just having and then there are going to be some things which are more sensitive, which I will have the agent acting as an advisor to a person, and I'll never have an external facing channel just because my risk appetite isn't there.
Yeah. Thanks, Francois. It's great. We've already got questions coming in off the back of what both of you have said, but they are questions that I can put to all of you. So I'm going to pause on those a little bit and hear from a couple of our other speakers first, then I will go straight to the questions from the audience as well. But great, keep those questions coming in. I think it's great if we go to Ed next, because Ed, as I say, it's great to have you here from the Met Office. And also for this particular conversation, because you can bring in the perspective from an organization that is so much about data and analysis. And I think maybe you have managed to do some of that kind of external use of technology in a way maybe that other parts of government haven't managed to do. So Ed, I'm coming over to you now. Can you tell us a little bit about what the AI journey has been for the Met Office so far?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Siobhan. Pleasure to be here. As you say, the Met Office has always been a big data organisation, and we've always done some permutation of machine learning or AI, although not necessarily always acknowledged under that label. I think for us, what the transformational moment was that came about sort of 2020 to 2022, I guess, was really that convergence of unprecedented volumes of data, increasing availability of powerful compute, particularly GPUs, being able to make sense of that, plus equipping our scientists with some of those tools to be able to make best use of that. So it was around, well, early 2022 that we formulated our data science framework, which was really a formulation of a lot of our approach that laid out the capabilities, people, partner type aspects that we would need to consider in a more concerted way going forwards. But it was even the end of 2022 when there was some really disruptive innovation in the weather space from some of the big technology companies, really exploiting some of the deep learning technologies to the full within this domain. And our chief AI officer often refers to this jokingly as the missing Christmas, because all of these papers, all of this work came out in late December, almost in the days leading up to Christmas, which then led to us really pressing the accelerator in the new year on some of that work. And so April 2023, we launched a program around AI for numerical weather prediction. So could we explore complementary approaches to our traditional physics-based weather models from using deep learning techniques? We accelerated some of that work further through partnership with the Alan Turing Institute in August 2023, so leveraging some of the skills from the National Data Science and AI Institute. And then really the consolidation of a lot of that and some of the work that stemmed from that has really been wrapped up in a program that we started in 2024, which we call AI for Everyone, which touches on how we're employing AI and machine learning within our national capability space, which is talking about what the weather will be, in our products and services space, which is talking about what the weather will do, and then the underpinning enabling space, which touches on aspects around things like co-pilots and other tools like that. And so I guess it's very much a journey we're still on, so certainly haven't solved in that sense. But I think what has been encouraging has been seeing that transition in our staff from very skeptical, where we're looking to break 60 years of numerical weather prediction dogma and how we can produce some of these forecasts, to then curious, and then going from curious to confident through the use of some of these tools, but also, as David alluded to, some of the support, the training, the policies that underpin that. But that said, there's still more work to do, particularly in some of the external space, as Francois alluded to, because while we are looking at running some of these things routinely, there is obviously additional considerations when we're exposing those externally.
Thanks, Ed. I think you've touched on those other aspects, the kind of cultural change as much as the technological changes as well. And as you say, I really like the way that you explain the journey that some of your colleagues have been on, from skeptical to curious to confident. And I think probably people in the audience and your fellow speakers, they can look at their workforce and know what stage they're at maybe on that journey. So I think really talking about the culture change. And I guess for the in using these technologies, and this is something that probably will resonate across the public sector as well, you're raising expectations of your customers as well, I imagine, that they are now expecting much more bespoke kind of forecasts. Is that right? So you're kind of creating higher demand as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I alluded to it briefly, that what people care about ultimately is what the weather's going to do, not what the weather's going to be. So actually, do I need to take an umbrella rather than is it going to rain? And AI offers enormous opportunities for being able to transform those types of services and those types of products by bringing effectively the decisions closer to the data. But as Francois had alluded to, that's not without challenge, particularly when we're needing to make sure appropriate guardrails are in place for some of that.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. And Emily, on that, I think it's a good point to come over to you, because Ed was talking about the impact on colleagues and on the workforce. So in your position with Salesforce, you work with departments across the UK government, and in particular focus on those kind of what does this mean for transforming the future of work and the workplace? So can you give us a little bit of a sense of how you think AI transformation at the moment is already transforming the work that civil servants and public servants do? And what are some of the kind of benefits, but also maybe what are some of the concerns that people have?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I'll address the concerns first because it seems to be the most conversation that I'm having naturally. Instinctively, people want to talk about the potential challenge areas. And I think there seems to be this misconception. And I think because AI covers such a broad term, we use the kind of term AI and we say, oh, we need to have an AI policy and an AI strategy, and we need to do something with AI, and it becomes this like buzzword. I speak to people a lot about this buzzword AI of, we need to do something, but we don't really know what. And I think the conversations I'm having is almost trying to just translate that into where is it going to have impact? Where is it going to add value? Where does it make sense to put it in? Not just putting it in because it's this big fancy buzzword. Yeah. We need to catch up with the private sector and we think that it's something we should do. And I think a lot of the concern areas come when people are kind of trying to figure out where it's going to have that impact and value. And coming on to some of the points that my colleagues on the panel have made, it comes back to right jobs for the right people. And I think this is where we kind of go from that concern into value when we figure out, like, is this the right job for AI, and that broader term to do, or is it the right job for a person? And when we talk about the human intervention points, when we talk about what kind of jobs AI should handle, we need to be looking at it as that kind of, exactly like Francois was saying, this is another kind of workforce for you that you're assigning a job to. I right now work in the technology industry. If I was going to be going into a building firm, they're not going to put me as a bricklayer because that's not my skill set. So we need to look at the skill sets of the AI tools that we have available and the skill sets of our humans and aligning the right jobs to the right people. And that alleviates a lot of concern at that point, because people seem to have this conception of, right, AI is going to come in Terminator style and take all our jobs and, take over the world. And actually, it's not. I challenge a lot of the customers that I speak to say, I actually see AI as making humans more human, because us as people, we have skill sets in human connection that AI can never replace. We build relationships. We understand the nuances of the way people speak and the terminology and the sentiment that people use. And we can build deeper human connections. We can make decisions differently to an AI tool. But if you ask me to read a 300-page document, can I do that in, a few seconds and understand and summarize that? No, that's going to take me time. So let's look at the broader sense of the skill sets of these tools that we have and align those skill sets to the jobs that need to be done. And I think if we can take that back step and start to look at it that way, rather than just AI something we need to crowbar into our process, I think the transformation comes when we take a step back and say, let's redesign our process around the skill sets we have available, uplift our human workforce. We talk about, we're going to rip and replace them, but actually, no, what I'm seeing is that when it's implemented effectively, and we have these kind of customer examples of what we've been seeing already, is that the effective implementation of using it as a tool means that we give those simple, repetitive, kind of summarization type tasks to the AI tools. And actually then we open up doors for our humans to deliver more complex tasks, to uplift their skill sets, to have more time to think and make decisions and to do the things that make them more human. So actually I'm giving myself a thumbs up there. Actually, we're making ourselves, more efficient and more skilled in the workforce. So I think the best thing that we can do is step away from our current process and away of our current thinking and strip it back to skill sets and tools and look at them in the same kind of bucket. Like, we have humans and AI agents available to us. We have these jobs that need to be done, and start aligning those kind of tasks to the right people.
Emily, thanks so much. And I see we've got more questions coming in. I am going to go to Shiraz and then we'll go to the questions, but just say thanks so much, Emily. I think I really like what you say about AI. It's not going to replace the humans. It's going to make the humans more human. And there are things that the humans then can focus on, like building the relationships. I wonder, there might be people and please, there's no question that you can't ask. So I think we've had questions around, people have heard this before, but they still have concerns around what if they're going to lose certain skills. We can come back to that because AI is going to be doing certain skills routinely. What if humans then start to lose certain skills? And what does that mean for them in terms of their training and skills? We can certainly come back to that in the conversation. You say people are going to uplift their skills. What does that actually mean in terms of what are the types of skills that people are going to need going forward? So we'll come on to those when we come on to the general questions. Lots of food for thought already, and great to see all the questions coming in. Sheroz, I'm coming to you now. So you've heard all your fellow speakers talk about what their journeys have been like and their experiences. Can you tell us a little bit from the UK government investments perspective where you sit now? What's worked well in terms of AI implementation, and also your honest thoughts on what could be better and where some of the challenges are?
Ooh. Shall we start with the challenges? Because I don't think we are remotely unique. What I could espouse to be challenges would be sitting there in every single department, every ALB. Ultimately, it boils down to culture, which is a very common thing that people will hear. But culture defines your ability to innovate. There's often a reluctance because there is a reluctance to move away from the norm, what you're comfortable with. There is a concern, as you've already highlighted, that you might be replaced. And then there is a concern around trust and whether I can actually use this thing and lean on it to help me. And within that, we also have to recognize that AI is effectively a field of study. And, you know, it's great that the panels kind of recognize the fact that it is not its own thing. It spans digital, it spans data, analytics, technology. Your laptop could have AI built into it. Most software packages have some form of LLM working behind it. Analytics has been using machine learning or deep learning for decades. It's not a new thing in that realm. And data is vital to the training of these models, or indeed, these models themselves are data factories almost, with the amount of metadata that they can produce when they are in operation. So AI spans all of these things. And for the vast majority of individuals, that's a very challenging area to navigate. You don't really know where to start off. So with any organization, you do need to start with three key things, and that's the way I approach it within UKGI. The first is governance and management, not designed in a way to stifle innovation, but to enable people and empower them to know this is exactly how you can use it, when you can feel confident in how you use it, and the way forward with it. The second is around skills and capability. Now, in the future, and as things stand now, I would argue that expertise is more vital than it's ever been. The ability to think critically, the ability to problem solve, the ability to apply your knowledge and experience is absolutely essential. That's not been devalued, it has appreciated in value. Because in actual fact, when you are able to do things at lightning speed, you also need someone who is able to then ingest that and assess whether or not they agree with it. So critical skills and the human in the loop does stay, at least for the foreseeable future. And then finally, it's the element that we all need to do, which is define the art of the possible. And the way I've defined this within my organization is driving change through innovation. And this is identifying the demonstrars for how you can operationalize different tools that will generate efficiencies. In my own mind, I don't think of AI as the solution. Oftentimes we go straight to AI, but what you will typically find when you are trying to embed any kind of AI product is there is either an underlying operational inefficiency, or there is a digital solution to what someone thinks is the AI solution, or there is actually a value case that hasn't actually been articulated properly. And then in the final instance, you might have an AI application. So what have I and my team done? We've made sure we've done two things. One, we understand our organization better than anyone else in the organization. And I challenge anyone who is in any DDAT function to sit in the organization they're in and be able to define what everyone does in 5 simple steps. Because if you can do that, that means you've internalized the business and you know where you can generate most value. Now, applying that approach, we have rolled out AI in several different instances. Our project management function is AI enabled, but digitally enabled as well. We use something as simple as Planner Premium to map out hundreds of activities across hundreds of individuals, manage interdependencies, automate any form of risk reporting that we need, but ensure that the PMO function within our organization has the ability to critique that and critically review what's being put out so that they can then put it to the senior leadership team. We've developed secure GPT models of our own. We utilize that for specific use cases. If you think about what government often does in any kind of advisory or policy context, it is capture information, assess the gaps, consider comparators, do an options appraisal, put out a submission. Each one of those 5 steps can have a Gen AI element to it. And what we've done is walk with our teams through those processes to go, this is how you could enable yourselves through each step using the secure model that we've done. And we've seen massive benefits to that. And then naturally, analytics. We do look at government's financial investments and liabilities as UKGI. I myself am responsible for reporting on that. And so we have used machine learning and different algorithms to assess things like downside stress scenarios across government's financial liabilities, and indeed published that and handed it to the OBR. But all of those things took time, I should say. It is a journey that you go on, and it does require leadership at all levels. And it also requires the ability to really be able to speak to the people that you're trying to bring on the journey, which a lot of people talk about, but don't necessarily get right.
Yeah. Sheroz, thank you so much. Really, Francois, did you want to come in on that?
I was just really interested in when you spoke about, I don't think of AI as a solution, and you speak about looking for the underlying operational inefficiency. And I think that it feels to me like that's what a lot of the leading companies are doing, is so effectively we've been going through a lot of exercises with people where we start off by saying, look, what if you were to hire unlimited labor? What would each of these processes actually look like? And you first try and identify where the process is actually constrained by, this idea of where is agentic AI going to have the biggest impact? Well, it's going to have the impact where, we generally have a people constraint. And I think it feels to me like you spoke about these end-to-end processes. We see a lot of customers who, like, for example, an end-to-end care process for a patient, or a banking customer who's looking at everything from onboarding through to upsell, through to continuous KYC. And I think mapping out those end-to-end things before you start applying these AI vectors makes sense for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, thanks, Francois. And I was going to say as well, Sheroz, that I like the way you said operational inefficiency. Think about that first. Then is there a digital solution before you even go to the AI solution? I think what we're also seeing in government is there's a lot of digitalization of bad processes being done. So they're skipping to the second stage without doing the first stage, I think. And there's a real danger that we're digitalizing some really bad operational kind of approaches as well. So lots of efficiencies to be had before you get to the AI stage. Absolutely. Thank you to all of you for those great kind of responses to the very first questions. You've stimulated lots of questions from the audience. So I'm going to come over to the audience. And I think several of you mentioned the importance of data and getting some of those basics right before you go to building the case for AI solutions. And Kirsty Shaw said, I'm not sure where Kirsty is from, but she said, we are focusing on fixing underpinning capabilities before we jump. Things like legacy IT, poor quality data, limited budgets. Keen to hear any examples of shortcuts. So your thoughts on, can you shortcut getting the foundations in place before you move to some of these AI solutions? Who would like? Emily, yeah, you've got your hand up.
I don't think it's about shortcutting it. I think it's about understanding where you want to do it in tandem, because I think that it's if you build a whole new process, then you try and look at, okay, how do we kind of move on to the next level? You're going to generally see 2 challenges. One, your process is going to be built around the kind of technology you have available today. And then you're then going to have to rework your process and your data and all of those things into that kind of new element later. But also, technology is moving so fast. Like I went on maternity leave last year. Agentforce, what I look after in terms of our agentic capability didn't exist before I left, and I came back and I'm now the specialist. Like the speed of innovation is something that we've never seen before in society in general. So you have to kind of almost do the two together, or at least the two in mind. I was talking to some customers yesterday. I did the public sector challenge this year. We walked a load of peaks across the Peak District. And I was very tired at many points. And you'd look at the whole mountain and you go, wow, that's a really big task. Like, this is just looks really unachievable. But actually, when you look at your feet in front of you and you do just kind of go one foot in front of the other, you get through it. But you can't just do one or the other. You can't just look at the mountain and say, that's too big, we can't achieve it. But you can't just look at your feet because you fall off the cliff edge. Like, we need to be doing the two in tandem. So when you're prepping your data, when you're looking at your processes, you need to have a vision of, how do I want this to be? Like, what's my blue sky thinking? Where is my kind of future state? Because that's how we transform into that future, rather than just, right, I'm going to prep my data and try and kind of fix all these problems. Then when I get to that end point, then I'll start looking at AI. And it's like, there's never going to be an endpoint. Like, data's never going to be perfect. Like, our processes are never going to be perfect. We can only innovate at such a pace and only get things so right. So there has to almost be a little bit of a leap of faith where we say, right, this is the process we want to achieve. Here's how, here's our vision. So what do we need to do with our data in that process, and prioritize? Like, where are our quick wins? Where could we maybe add some value short term so that we can keep this long-term vision going? So I don't think it's as binary as, let's fix our data, then sort this problem, then sort that problem. Like, they all interlink.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to come to David, then Sharoz, then Francoise. We'll have to keep your answers quite short because we've got lots of questions coming in. So David. Sorry, you're on mute, David. Thanks.
Sorry, it shows my technological expertise. My very quick thought is that shortcuts actually are the big pitfall. When you look at a demo of an AI product, it suggests to you that AI is all about a shortcut. It will do something for you in 90 seconds that used to take 3 hours. But actually, I think that's the way to hit a brick wall. You're looking for the shortcuts. It does need to be, unfortunately, thorough and systematic. So I think shortcuts are to be avoided.
Okay, thanks, David. Sharoz?
Yeah, I'll go quick. I actually get asked this question quite a bit. Look, agreed, there's no shortcuts, but it is true you can do things in parallel. There are just 4 quick things you should always focus on. Define your benefits realization framework. If you're in government, if you don't know how to do that, very happy to have a chat, but focus on value. Here we stick around, but I know a lot of CDOs in the private sector who lost their jobs because they couldn't speak to the value, and it's essential. Step 2, corporate services is your friend. Always go with HR, resourcing, recruitment, legal, compliance, finance. These are segmented processes that are evergreen, they're regulated. That's where you can drive automation quick. Those efficiencies will give you that budget you so desperately desire. Using those 2 things, determine what your priority projects are and focus on those. Go with 3 to start off, 3 big ones, and go for incremental change underneath all of that. And that can include the governance and management side. And that will build you up. Also reference the government data maturity assessment tool. If you are within public sector, it's good enough and it'll give you what you need in terms of where you're trying to target your growth.
Thanks, Sharoz. Some very practical tips there. And then Francoise, last point on this question.
Yeah, so I think this challenge of not doing anything because I have a lot of tech debt, so I have to do something without doing everything, I think is something that every company has. And so what I've found is, if you've gone through that process of breaking down what your agentic experiences are into specific jobs to be done, you'll tend to find each job to be done only requires access to a limited amount of data and a limited amount of workflow. And that process, by going through that early, it actually defines the backlog, so you know what to fix first. Otherwise, you end up saying, well, I have to get all my data perfect in order to deliver any single workflow. And there tends to be a few really high-value workflows which can be delivered with the mess you have before you end up with the perfect feature you wish you had.
Thanks, Francoise. Ed, I'm coming to you with the next question, and I'm going to merge 2 questions, and then anyone else can come in as well. But I think this touches on what Emily said about how fast everything's moving. And Ed, it just struck me when you were talking about the Met Office journey, how it's happened in such a short space of time. It's only been a matter of kind of a few years, really. So Adam's question was, a lot of you have been working with AI prior to the AI boom that helped, so ChatGPT, etc. How did you feel when you saw the potential opportunities this boom would bring, and how have things gone since then? And then I'm going to put that together with the question from Charlie G, who has said, can the panel comment on where they see the daily use of AI in the public sector in, say, 5 years, when the hype has normalized and the peaks and troughs have been ironed out? Any midterm forecast would be great. So, Ed, I guess it's your thoughts on, could you see the opportunities? Has there been this boom, and where do you think it's going to go in future? That's quite a big question, I think, but just your thoughts on the evolution, I guess, of the use of this new tech. It's such a big question.
So I think,
as
I said previously, then yeah, I mean, I think, as I said previously, to some extent, we've always had some AI and ML incorporated in some of our processes, particularly for how we model the weather, although not necessarily acknowledged under that label. The big transformational difference was around some of the deep learning technologies, and I think when those were first being applied to within the weather and climate space, I think it's fair to say that the concern was real, ranging from around would these types of methods work to some of the implications of that in terms of our understanding of some of the physics and explainability of these types of opportunities. But I think probably being an organization of 500 plus scientists, then I think there's also that appreciation of what the opportunity is, and that created some of that curiosity to enable us to be able to explore some of that. Initial explorations of that were very, very small, but provided that foundation. And I think it's fair to say, and I guess this links closely to some of the previous discussion, that actually, as Shirose said, identifying what the potential value is in those parts of the process, but also where you can have support from other partners is really, really key for being able to leverage those opportunities. Because although, for example, the Met Office had has a lot of experience in data science techniques, actually there were new skills, and being able to access those was really key to being able to accelerate some of our developments. I mean, where it's going, certainly within the weather and climate space at the moment, we're anticipating AI running alongside our traditional physics-based models, really targeting the best of both. And I think this very strongly echoes what Emily was saying as well, that it's really about augmented intelligence employed where it makes best sense, rather than necessarily artificial intelligence and just proliferating that for the sake of it. So it's very value driven and maximizing impact where it delivers that value.
Thanks, Ed. I'm going to ask if anyone else wants to come in on that question of kind of in the next 5 years where you see it going, but I'm also going to bring in Kevin's point, because I think it's the same kind of point. Kevin says, we talk about applying AI to discrete tasks and processes, for example, but how can government structure its internal data and ways of working in such a way that AI can then be systematically woven into those ways of working to help expedite more joined up and innovative government policy? So do you see in future AI, I think this goes back to what you were saying, Francois, are good at the internal stuff, but actually in the next 5 years, will we be using these new technologies to really be transformative in the way government can deliver more joined up services to the public, for example? Emily, you have your hand up, and then I'm going to come to anyone else who wants to come in on this.
Yeah, I just want to make a wider point on the kind of 5-year viewpoint piece, is that there's almost a sentiment there of like, we can't necessarily know what their 5-year landscape looks like. I was having a conversation the other day, and it's like, no one worked as a train driver until we had the big rail revolution, and suddenly we now have train drivers, and now those train drivers don't shovel coal anymore. So we also have to, while we can plan and kind of forecast and look at what the future state might look like, we have to acknowledge that because of that speed of innovation, that there are going to be yes, potentially skill sets that are diminished and less valuable now, but there's also going to be skill sets created. Like we didn't need prompt engineers 100 years ago. We barely even needed IT professionals. And now that's like an entire sector of our industry. So I think there's a scope for what is the job landscape going to look like in 5 years' time? Because the skill sets that we think are valuable now and the skill sets that we, work on are going to change. It's not that they're going to necessarily go away. Like, we still need humans that are skillful, but the skill sets required will be different. We look at 1,000 years ago, we needed hunter-gatherers, and now we go to Tesco. So we can all have comfort in society that we are going to just shift what is required and what is important to us as a workforce. And I think once you kind of have a think about that and the kind of skill sets that are going to be required going forward, that's really important. In terms of the transformation within government, I'll keep it short, but I'm having some really, really exciting conversations with a number of different sectors across kind of defence, justice, policing, social services, central government, that are seeing this not just for those kind of initial tasks. That's where people start to build comfort and to look at managing risk. But people are getting excited about this. Those that are innovative and start thinking and opening their minds are seeing what is potential kind of possibilities in that journey. And whilst I can't share specific examples right now, I can confirm that there are so many people that are embracing this technology and looking at where it can transform.
Thanks, Emily. Francoise and then Sheroz on the future question.
Yeah. So the thing that actually surprised me the most about Gen AI when it became available was how quickly consumers adopted it. Because I think a lot of these technologies like neural networks and things we've been using for a while, and they were like, there was a high gate to entry. So they started with tech folks and then worked their way out. And this is something where our consumers are extremely like Gen AI literate, but they also have this overwhelming trust in it. So they think that a Gen AI model can genuinely know them and answer their questions. And that's kind of the way that they are looking for services. In the private sector, they're looking for companies to offer those services. I think the same will be true of the way the citizen relates to government services and the way they try and get access to services. So that I think is a lot of the changes in the public sector and the private sector are certainly being driven by consumer expectations. But I think when you start to answer the second question, how do you structure your internal data so that you can deliver value? The approach we've taken, because we're really focused on how do you relate to your citizens, to your customers, to your regulated industries, is we say that the way you should reorganize your data is you should create a link to the citizen. As long as you can define the relationship between the data point and the citizen, or the data point and the regulated firm, that is the way that you get AI to work. Because a question is always based in context. So what do I need to know about the citizen in order to answer this question? And then the second part is essentially attribute-based access control. So once I've linked all this data to the citizen, then I just say for each of these channels and each of these jobs to be done, what are the guardrails? What can they actually access? And what do I want to mask based on those jobs to be done? So if you do those two things, link it to the citizen, and then also mask it based on the use, then you kind of have the data foundation in place to make these AIs become personalized.
Yeah, thanks, Francois. So, and in that context, a lot of the barriers to using some of these tools already are more about the issues with data and the way it's managed.
Yeah, that's not the way people organize their data today. Today, most people's data assets are organized around departments or products or line of business functions. They're not typically organized around the stakeholder who is interfacing with like your external service portal. And so that's why that last mile linkage is something that, I mean, we've been really focused on, because that's what we obsess about. But I do think that is the key question for an AI is, what is the context? So where is this conversation happening? And then if you can't link the data and knowledge to that context, then you're kind of done. So rather than trying to solve everything and make it clean, just establish that linkage. And AI tends to be pretty good at understanding really complex relational structures. The other thing is, unstructured data is something which organizations are really poor at. They've had to get really good at in order to get AI to work. So they've suddenly had to understand how AI can pre-process data to make retrieval better. How AI can, for example, take images and graphs and turn them into something which is readable by machines. So those things are the places where we've also seen new investments required.
Yeah. Thanks, Francois. Shiroz, last point on this question.
Sure. I mean, it's a multifaceted question, and it's probably one that keeps me up at night. So I would want to contextualize it a little bit. An analogy I always give to people is that if a bunch of private companies decide to work together, they'd be done in for collusion and anti-competitive practices. But within government, you are the one industry that is encouraged to collude. And yet we probably don't do it as much as we should. So the mindset has to be that we're all in it together, and a rhetoric of gamifying or not being completely transparent with one another isn't remotely helpful. And we are doing a lot to address that, and we need to continue to do that. The second thing in terms of ambitions is the government does have a national data strategy. The ambitions to digitize, reform, make the public sector more efficient, those are all there. And truly, in very simple terms, I'd just like to see us deliver on those things that we have talked about. But I would put a challenge to any public sector employee on this call in relation to that. If you think that is going to happen through your PermSec or your DG or your SCS, you are mistaken. Each one of you individually has to question themselves and go, should I be collaborating with someone on this? Have I thought about it? Do I know for sure nobody else is doing this? Because 99% of the time, somebody else in another department has either made use of the same technology or is trying to build something similar. So don't make that mistake. I do practice what I preach. I have a digital platform I wanted to roll out in a few months to capture and automate the way in which I capture a whole host of information. I am pressing that on pause because the department needs something like that. So we will explore whether it's scalable. That could delay me, but the whole life costs in terms of benefits of doing it that way far outweigh it. So from a government-wide standpoint, that's the right thing to do. That's not always a comfortable thing to do, but we all need to get into that mindset of putting ourselves into those challenging situations where maybe something slows down a little bit, but in whole life terms, it's more beneficial.
Shiroz, I'm so glad you said that, because so many of the conversations that we have with Global Government Forum boil down to, if only we could share good practice more and lessons learned, and how that would kind of remove some of the inefficiencies. And that leads me to Mike's question, which, David, I'm going to put to you first, because Mike said, whilst I agree with David, so this is what you said right at the beginning, David, that some of the big stuff hasn't been touched yet. There's a lot to be said for rolling out the learning to, I guess this is LA local authorities, from central government, from the low-hanging personal AI usage, so that LA colleagues gain trust and understand the what's in it for me conversation more quickly. So I think Mike's point is, even if it's just about the internal processes and the benefits of those, shouldn't we be better at sharing the lessons learned from those so that people can get used to using it at that level, and then it will make it easier to go on to the next step? So David, your thoughts on how much better could we be at learning lessons and sharing good practice with each other?
I think much better, and it's a really good point. And I think there are a couple of things to say about this. One is, we have a lot of people who still have not used Gen AI very much. They have not downloaded ChatGPT onto their phone and played around with it in their private lives, and possibly are not aware of some of those small benefits, bits of low-hanging fruit. So just in terms of raising everyone's AI literacy, I think that it's a good thing to share these things. To take the example of what we're doing with Copilot, where I mentioned earlier that we are increasing our number of licenses, we're not simply handing those out and saying to people, have a go. We're forming what we're calling Copilot communities, where we're going to get people together in the areas in which they work, the same sort of teams and divisions, to come together maybe once a month and talk about what they're doing and share ideas. And we're going to use that to sort of lift ideas that we're going to put in a playbook to share with everybody, because that way everybody learns. So I think that is really important. But the other side to this, though, is if you're not doing that, you run the risk that people are doing it for themselves in ways that are not terribly safe. So there's a lot of stuff you can read now about shadow AI, about people who perhaps are using non-secure, publicly available tools in ways that perhaps they're putting in sensitive data from their employer. Perhaps they're trusting them too much. I think that was a point that Francois made earlier about trusting AI too much because it looks so plausible. So if you're not sharing techniques, good practice, good guidance widely, then people may not be doing anything. That's one problem, but they may be doing things that actually aren't terribly safe, and they possibly have a greater feeling of security about that than they would about, you know, just conventionally using the internet and other things. So I think it's a really important point.
Yeah, thanks. Ed, yeah, coming over to you.
It was just to pick up on a passing word that David said that probably needed or would benefit from a little bit more articulation. But that was around the opportunities that already exist for sharing of information. And while those could always be increased, there are particular opportunities, for example, the AI playbook, where there are good examples that are reported, the One Big Thing training that you alluded to in your introduction that's coming later this year, again, targeting some of those relatively low-level opportunities for making some of those changes, which I think is hugely positive.
Thanks. And I think we can probably share those with people that have registered as well to make sure that everybody has access to all of that if they want to know more about those. Very quickly, there's a question coming. I think, Shiroz, this might have been something you said in your opening comment. So it's from Odene McGowan. Sorry if I've mispronounced your name there. But hello, I would be interested in the name of the tool mentioned during the piece on project management. Shiroz, did you mention an AI tool for project management?
It's literally just Planner Premium.
Okay.
It's £28 a month for a single user, depending on what kind of corporate license you have. Try it out. If you're Copilot enabled as well, just check out the report function.
Fantastic, thank you. I think we've lost Ed for a minute. Hopefully Ed will be coming back to us unless there's a weather emergency going on at the moment, but hopefully Ed will be back with us soon. Nicola Cook has come in, and this I think was probably prompted by the concern that you raised right at the beginning, David, but I welcome everyone's thoughts on this because it's an interesting angle, I think, which we probably don't talk about enough. What are the panel's thoughts on the environmental factors of AI? So we're getting on to some of the concerns. There's another question around bias. So I'm going to ask the one on environmental factors first. David, again, I'll come to you first because you mentioned this, but your thoughts on environmental factors of AI and how significant are those?
Well, what exactly the impact of AI globally is on the environment, I'm probably not qualified to quantify that, but we all know that it is very energy hungry. It also is very water hungry, you know, for cooling purposes and data centers and things like that. What the answer to that is, I don't think is entirely clear. If you're working for central government, you might be aware that DESNZ is actually leading some work in DEFRA on the sort of the government's approach to this and the mitigations you can possibly bring in. At a much lower level, the sorts of things you can be thinking about are they relate back actually to sort of training and sharing good practice. If you have people who are better trained and better practiced at using something as basic as Copilot, then they won't be sort of writing scattergun prompts and trying about 20 prompts to do one thing. So you can actually reduce the number of wasteful prompts, wasteful uses. I don't think that's the silver bullet for the environmental question, but it's something that you can actually do now. Final comment though that I'd make about this is that when we talk to sort of people in our organization about AI and their thoughts and their fears, the environment tends to be the thing that comes up first and has the most interest, actually more so than jobs, which is quite interesting, and more so than other stuff around, you know, what's the impact on education and so on. So I think for anyone who is involved in implementing AI, it's something that you really need to think about and sort of have a message about.
Yeah, thanks, David. Shiroz, you've got your hand up. Ed, great to have you back in. I was going to say in the room, back in another room with us. So Shiroz and then Ed on the question of environmental impact.
Sure. So yes, it's true. Now, environmental impact versus energy consumption and baseload, two very different things, just for the avoidance of doubt. The key thing here is that actually between data centers and compute, your AI query is using 30x what you would in terms of a Google search, in terms of energy output. That's true, that's fair. Now, there's an innovation dimension. We are getting more and more advanced, both in terms of the processors we use, as well as our ability to store data. And certainly internationally, data centers are becoming hugely more advanced, and you need less space and energy for more compute. So innovation can help with some of that. Large language models, as they're currently being developed, are becoming more streamlined. Yes, Gen AI is a big thing, but it's not perfect. You can always optimize the back end of any pipeline or model or code, and people are doing that right now in the LLM space. That means less tasks involved, which means less energy. But at the same time, the key thing is allow it to be part of the solution, right? If we can generate the efficiencies, if we can become better at what we deliver, such as large capital projects linked to energy generation, then that helps to offset some of the challenges that arise. So it is cyclical in nature to a degree with this one.
Thanks, Shiroz. And Ed, your thoughts on the environmental issues?
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, you can't work for an environmental organisation like the Met Office without this being a constant question. I think Jerome summarised this absolutely perfectly as to it being such a large consideration, but also there are opportunities for this. The other thing I would just draw attention to is that Google recently released a report showing some of the environmental impacts of AI inference, which is certainly an interesting read, but also demonstrates some of the importance that some of the technology companies are also taking to this issue, which is hugely exciting to see as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ed. And it's interesting. Yeah, Francois, you wanted to come in.
It's one of the things I always struggle with is when I think it's, clearly the UK government has said it's really important that we have AI capacity within the country. But I think also a lot of the time you have options to locate your AI capacity in places where you have, thermal energy and things like that. So you like the right answer might be to actually do some of the processing in places where the climate is cooler and we have geothermal energy and that sort of thing. And then we still probably do need to have capacity inside the country as it becomes a strategic resource, but maybe that's not used for everything. But I do think it is a big challenge in terms of all the forecasts we're seeing is the demand just keeps going up, and the actual efficiencies out of the model aren't improving enough to offset that demand.
Yeah, thanks, Francois. So I think a lot more work is going to have to go into that issue. We've got time, I think, for one more question, and also we've had another question about that project management tool, Shiroz. So I think what we might do is just capture the name of it off you, and we'll send a link to everybody so they have that, anyone that's registered. But I think in terms of the and to the report on the environmental impacts that you mentioned, Ed, as well, if we can send that link around. Don't worry, we'll work all of that out afterwards. So the last question I think we've got time for from Tanya, and I not surprised this one came up because this is probably the question that we get asked the most when we do any events on AI, is how can we ensure bias is removed from decision-making processes when using AI? And Francois, I think this might go right to the heart of what you were saying at the beginning about why the public sector maybe is more cautious about using AI for some of its customer-focused kind of service delivery. So you put your hand up first, coming to you first.
So there's some really specific technical measures which we have been putting in place for a while when we were doing predictive AI. We were saying essentially never train your model on protected attributes about your citizen. So if your model doesn't know about their gender or their race, then that can't be like a bias that's included in the outcome. And the same is true with Gen AI. So when we're talking about making sure that an AI is only answering questions based on trusted data, it also means we should be putting in place attribute-based access controls to make sure we only share data with the model that's entitled to know for that use case. Otherwise, bias will creep in. The second thing is we have technical countermeasures now for to make sure that a response should actually be grounded in the data you hold about your citizen rather than data that's been scraped from the internet. So when we talk about hallucination, what models are doing is they're saying, I've been trained on all this data. And you have this kind of idea of content quality metrics where I can say, I'm going to look at the output. I'm going to say, is this output based on data I sent to the model at the time that I asked the question, or is it based on something it's hallucinated or it's scraped off the internet? And we should be eliminating that. So we should be looking at technical countermeasures to make sure that's not the case. But then the third thing is there's this new type of bias which has started to creep in, which is these Gen AI experiences have a habit of agreeing with you. So they really, part of their training, you see a lot of the evidence of this where people say, test this hypothesis, and the model will tend to agree with the person that is asking the question. So that unfortunately, that last part, we have to just train people to know that this is like your best friend who will always agree with you. It's not always your best person to challenge your thinking.
Yeah.
So some education required as well.
We need it to be the critical friend, not the...
Yeah. And that's still, I think, something which hasn't been resolved. And technically, I don't think it's been resolved.
Thanks, Francois. Emily, you wanted to come in on this one as well.
Yeah, and I think to echo Francois' point, there's technical ways that we can manage those kind of guardrails and how people kind of can train those models. And we look at, the benefits of that kind of closed source agentic AI, where we are feeding it a single source of data versus the kind of open source like our ChatGPTs and our general LLMs. But I also think this is where it comes back to that skill set point of, do we always want the AI tool making that decision? Like, is that always the right thing? So that's sometimes the question to ask too, is that if there is a fear of a risk of that kind of bias, it can be your best friend that you have the autonomy to make the decision over, but you can almost use it as a consultative tool. Let it summarize, let it provide the information, let it get to that point. So I agree, like a bias, and especially depending on the use case and the risk of that use case, I think this comes down to that risk profiling. When I'm working with customers now, I'm always saying like, okay, so what would the risk be if something didn't go to plan? But we put human workforces out and we have to manage the risk of our human workforces. We need to manage the risk of our agentic workforces as well. And it comes back to, okay, yeah, if there's a potential for bias here, what's the risk? Like, what could that bias be? What would the impact of that be? So I think whilst the question of how do we manage that is there, and we have answers to that, it's sometimes always, should we manage it? Should the risk be placed here? And if the risk is too great, that's where we say the best place for this is a human in that decision-making process.
Thanks, Emily. We are pretty much out of time, but I just want to ask Shahroz, David, or Ed if they wanted to add anything on the question around bias. David, yeah.
Yeah, very briefly, I think Francois' point's a really powerful one. We tend to think of bias in terms of stuff that AI scrapes from the internet and then what it produces. And of course, we're going to check that because we're sensible. But the way that it creates an echo chamber for us, I think, is more dangerous. And if you look at some of the news about the impact of AI on young people, on teenagers who use it and actually use it to counsel them, or they think that's how they can use it, with, in some cases, apparently quite terrible results. I think that's perhaps the thing that we should focus on a bit more than just, oh, well, of course it hallucinates, of course it's biased. We know that. It's that influence it can have on us, where it makes us confident in our own bad judgments, that is potentially more dangerous.
Yeah, and that's been very topical. I think that's been in the news this week, hasn't it, in particular? Yeah. Shahroz, coming to you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of research paperwork on this, so I won't go into all of that. But here's the simple version. Even humans are biased. If we are making a decision, our background, skills, experience will bias us in some way, which is why AI is biased, because our bias informs theirs. From a public sector context, we already have the algorithmic transparency recording statements. We have to do those. We have 54 different standards, guidance, and policies we have to adhere to across DDAT. That is an actual figure. And the key thing just to remember is, if it is a material decision, then you want a council of sorts. It could be your strategic decision-making foreman, your exco, your opco, whatever it is. But you need to ensure a balanced set of views informs the final decision. Until we can develop these models in a way and have those safeguards, it needs to be done the old-fashioned way. So that's one bit of just practical guidance. This is why we still have the governance structures that we have, certainly within the public sector.
Thanks, Shahroz. Ed, any final thoughts from you?
I think not much more to add beyond the other panelists on this. I think it's, again, again, something to be mindful of in all policies. So some practical advice from Shiroz there.
Thank you. Well, we are exactly on time. I just want to say a huge thanks to all of you on the panel. We've covered so much ground there. Thanks so much to the audience for sending in those great questions. I think we really did get a very wide coverage there in terms of the questions. Thanks to Salesforce for being our knowledge partner for this webinar as well. I think fascinating conversation. It won't be the last conversation that we have on AI implementation. I'm sure we will be doing other webinars on this. As you say, things are moving so fast that who knows, if we come back in 6 months' time, we might be talking about a whole new set of issues. To our great audience, we would have sent you a short questionnaire. If you could just take a couple of minutes to fill that in, I would be hugely grateful on behalf of Global Government Forum. It means we can keep giving you webinars on the topics that are of most use to you and of most interest to you. We will also send all of you who watch live and who registered the link to the video so you can watch it again if you weren't able to see all of it. You can share it with your colleagues on catch up, and there will also be a write-up of today's conversation with some of the main points that were raised in the conversation, which will come round in a few weeks' time. But that just leaves me to say a big thanks again to Shiroz, to Emily, to Ed, to David, and to Francois. Thanks for giving us your time and your expertise, and I hope to see you and our audience on another one of our webinars again very soon. Thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day. Cheers.